All right, everyone, welcome back to Course of Action. I have a Amazon #1 bestseller in the house today. It's Brian Nelson. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you. #1 Amazon bestseller. You have a fantastic series out there that we're going to talk about. But what has life been like since becoming an author?
It's been pretty good. Yeah, I often say that I became a writer to sort of to make a living out of an identity crisis. I was the kind of person who jumped around a lot. Wasn't sure what I wanted to study. Did economics and international relations in college, but also loved to write, but thought it wasn't the thing that was practical. So I worked in finance for a while, then I worked in computers. I worked for technology for General Motors in Detroit. And then I had what I call my quarter life crisis, which is kind of realized that the corporate world wasn't really what I wanted. So I gave it up and went to graduate school in Tucson, Arizona, and that's when it kind of all started rolling. So my first book was nonfiction. It was about uprising in Venezuela in 2002. So I lived in Venezuela for a couple of years doing that research. Really wonderful experience. And then after that, I actually polished off. This is kind of funny. The Last Swordmaker, the first book in this tech trilogy, was what I'd actually been working on in graduate school. And after I went to Venezuela and I had a kid and was stuck at home doing a lot of diaper changing and stuff, I dusted off that manuscript, and that's what ultimately became The Last Swordmaker.
And
Yeah.
you were a Fulbright scholar. What is that?
So that's a department. That's a program run by the State Department, and so the idea is there's an interchange between someone in the United States who goes to another country, and the State Department finances that. You propose a project, and if you go through admissions process, and if they like your project and they feel like you're qualified, they sort of send you, and you're there as a little bit of as an ambassador for the U.S., but also to accomplish some project that is supposed to promote intercultural relations between your host country and the U.S. Um, I kind of broke that rule because my book ended up being about how the Venezuelan government had committed a bunch of human rights violations and killed a bunch of people, which was what sparked this coup d'etat against Chavez back in 2002. So I was later attacked by the Venezuelan government for that, but I
Wow.
still feel like I did the right thing. So
Yeah, I was reading about just while I was some of these other videos were editing and rendering this morning.
yeah,
After I fought all the software issues I was telling you about, but
yeah, yeah.
I started looking at some of your books. High praise for The Silence and the Scorpion, this coup against Chavez and the making of modern Venezuela. Um, Massive praise for it, saying it's one of the most in depth and researched and detailed accounts of all of this. And what a phenomenal book. Like, how does it feel to have people say something so highly of that and to give you such credit and then you got attacked by them? Like, you're kind of going, what's going on here, guys?
Yeah, yeah, that was a great experience, it's one of those experiences that matches sort of all your skills, and I imagine probably your experience in the military, you probably felt this at times. There's stuff that's kind of pushing you to the limit. You're in another country, you have to speak another language, you have to deal with people, negotiate to get interviews, you have to sort of be sort of stealthy because the people you need to interview sometimes, they're on different political sides of the spectrum. If they knew you were talking to the other people, they wouldn't want to be talking to you. So you have to be kind of very tactical about it. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience. The praise was also really great because again, it was my first book, and we all know how many people do a book and then it doesn't launch, or you have to write multiple books to get published. So that was really great. The attacks from the government were a little bit more of a surprise in the fact that you weren't sure where they were coming from, is because it's kind of, they have their own sort of propaganda people. I didn't realize that the people attacking me in the media were actually being paid to do it by the government. But once that sort of fell into place, it sort of made you realize that you'd sort of poke the hornet's nest a little bit.
Yeah.
But it turned out okay. It wasn't a great deal of harassment, and I know people in Venezuela who've had to flee Venezuela. Of course, met a lot of people who were the victims of human rights violations. So, ultimately, I'm pretty lucky.
Well, yeah, considering that you were attacked by essentially state-ran media that was being paid for by the government, and you know how dangerous that can be, and especially in today's world where it seems like every media company within the United States is, or within a country, is being paid by either the government or a political party. Like almost all of them have some kind of ulterior motive behind them. And you can see that when I go to the gym on base, I can see it because we'll have Fox and CNN and MSNBC and all of them lined
Yeah,
up on the panels. You can sit there and run on a treadmill or
right.
whatever, and you can see them all, and they'll be talking about the same story, and
Hmm.
it's just a different narrative in each one of them, and you're
Yeah,
like, you can't even get the real news anymore, and it's just like it's politically driven, it's views driven, it's I wouldn't put it past our government to have something to say in that in some
yeah.
regards. So it's crazy to think that, but it's true, and it's the facts of what's really going on in the world today. And this was back in, when was this?
This was, the coup happened in 2002.
So this is 20
So
years ago.
it was, yeah, this is 21 years ago. Yeah.
So
So what you just said is just so interesting on so many levels, and kind of, we could talk about it in so many different ways. But one of the things, of course, that's so interesting about that is the how that's an interesting use of technology,
it is.
right? That you can make stuff so confusing to people so quickly that they begin to doubt everything that is coming at them. And we know that this is the 2016 election. This is Russia's goal with the 2016 election, was we want people in America not to believe in the system, right? And so that was Putin's goal, and that's now so easy to do. Whenever something happens, you just immediately flood the internet with contradictory stories,
Hmm.
so that you immediately begin to doubt, even if it is absolutely clear at the beginning, we begin to doubt. And this is actually happening right now in with the Israeli conflict and Hamas and Gaza. There was an interesting news story the other day about a hospital that we're very confident was struck by an Israeli missile. But Israel has the infrastructure now with all their chatbots and AI and fake accounts that immediately they're able to counter that story.
Hmm.
And they were showing videos of missiles misfiring that are old clips, from historic footage, that, oh, this is what really happened. So within an hour of that hospital being hit, there were hundreds of thousands of posts and things disseminated trying to do damage control to that event. And
Yeah.
again, it just makes you doubt, what's happening.
Well, the
So,
United States, like I think we already question the government quite a bit,
mhm,
and there's already some questionable things, leading up to that election, and
yeah,
Trump and Clinton, and questionable acts around both of them.
hmm,
So there, I think there's already a large distrust in our government and in these
hmm,
candidates, and then you throw in Russia, who obviously made it worse. So I think it just was like it was that perfect storm of let's
hmm,
question everything, and then now we're questioning everything a couple of years later, the validity of the election, and then of
uh-huh,
course who we have in office now. A lot of people question if his even his ability to do it, and it's like
yeah,
it seems like the distrust now is maybe at an all-time high, and
yeah,
you just wonder like at what point in time are we going to have issues like some of these other countries do, where uh, people kind of push back a little too hard against the government, and when
right.
are we going to get out of our own way?
Yeah, yeah. And again, I would argue though that the polarization of America is greatly facilitated by the technology, right? It's greatly facilitated by all these actors that can come in and try to mess with the way people look at things and think about things. So, what I
Very true.
tried to do in that book, which is interesting, sort of talking about writing processes and how to sort of across information. And I'm sure you feel this way too. Oftentimes, you find a book and you're like, oh, okay, book represent the do. And that was actually Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden, because it was that very detailed, clocked, moment by moment action. I'm like, no one's going to believe the gringo who came down to Venezuela, and this is his opinion about what happened. My goal was just to grab the stories of all the people who are actually there, honestly portray them and juxtapose them, put them, here's somebody who's pro Chavez, who loves the guy, here's someone who hates him, put those stories right next to each other in this chronological event of this violence and uprising. And I'm just like, okay, you decide.
Yeah.
Because I felt when I got there that, you know, I was like, okay, maybe I'll give this guy a chance, because Venezuela had already been through almost 2 decades of economic decline. Here's somebody who's kind of a dark horse coming in, trying something new. But within a few weeks, I was like, okay, this guy's very dangerous, and things are not going to go
Didn't take you
with.
long.
Didn't take me long, and and it was, one of the things was how law was not applied evenly. Like, if you're my supporters or whatever, you get these benefits. If you're not, then we're coming after you, kind of thing. But the thing that was kind of, the case study for this was actually, I went to this guy's dairy farm. This guy had like 40 cows. He had a small farm, and the government was telling people to squat on their land. Oh, those rich people, they've gotten away with this for too long. Just go take their land. You go build on their land, do what you want. And then the government would not protect the property rights of the people. And and then this guy wasn't like Joe entrepreneur, Jeff Bezos. It wasn't like he had some huge estate, but he had all these people who were building their homes on his land. And we drove by this one guy who had a brand new F-150 pickup. And he's like, see that guy? He owns the funeral parlor in town, and he's making his weekend house on my land, right?
Weekend
So
house.
it shows you the sort of, how quickly things can deteriorate. But yeah, the idea was that if I felt that if I just show people what I'm seeing here, they'll come to the same conclusion I did, right?
Yeah. So you wrote the nonfiction, and then it came out, and then you switched over and said, "Okay, I'm going to pick up this fiction series." Um, how did your approach to fiction differ than your approach to the nonfiction?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I had actually studied fiction. My graduate degree was in fiction. So I had been pretty hardcore, and I was supposed for my Fulbright, I was supposed to write a novel.
Oh wow.
I wasn't really supposed to dabble in current politics, but I got to Venezuela and stuff was so crazy. I mean, it was like being in an episode of Mad Max. I mean, it was just, really wild. So I was like, this is so interesting that I don't need fiction. What's happening here is so crazy that I don't need to embellish on it. So that's why I kind of moved to nonfiction, which was actually really refreshing, uh, because when you're writing fiction, you doubt everything, or you question everything. Every piece of dialogue, you're like, is that correct? Would that character say that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
and you can just spend so many hours going over it and over it. And with nonfiction, you're like, okay, I interviewed this person. This is what they look like. This is what they said. I remember meeting this guy. He was very very anti-Chavez, for a good reason, because his son was murdered in this uprising. But I was asking him, why did you participate in this march? Why did you participate in this rally against Chavez? And he said, well, I was born in Lebanon, and I came here, and I really believe in this country, and I'm a profound patriot, and I would give my life to keep this country a democracy. And as the fiction writer, I was like, I don't think I would ever have my character say that just because it sounds just a little too like cheesy or, maybe even jingoistic. But I'm like, you just said it, so it's going in the book. And that's really nice when you're a writer to just be able to say, as long as I'm honestly portraying what these people say and their opinions, then I'm good. So it was refreshing. Um, Doing the fiction, though, of course, there's benefits of that too because you can do a lot more play. So with the Last Swordmaker is real quick is essentially an arms race between the United States and China as they try to develop this new generation of weapons using a mix of AI, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology. So that was really fun, like to do that research and speculate on the technology that exists now, and then extrapolate out to what that could look like in 4 or 5 years. How would the military use that for different purposes, whether it be medical or manufacture of weapons or as a weapon itself. So that was really the fun side of each kind of strategy. But again, as I said, when you're doing the fiction, you're always doubting yourself. So it was really great to not have to sort of doubt a lot of the writing that you're doing. Mm.
So this series, there's 3 books in it so far. Are they all standalones with kind of the same theme, or the characters move on to each one?
Yeah, you can read it straight through. Yeah, it's
Okay.
all the same characters, essentially one big story. Not much time elapses between each one. So you can read them as standalones, but it flows quite well, quite through. And going back to the idea of my identity crisis, each book definitely has a very different kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
So that I think it's very refreshing to go from one to the other because you feel like you're entering different worlds and different scenarios and different things to sort of think about and themes too.
Well,
Yeah.
and here's what, of course, you've seen these, but people who are listening haven't. Here's what some of the reviews had to say about it. So, Strand Magazine said, "A thinking person's military thriller. What's not to love?" The New York Times bestselling author James Rollins said, written with the authenticity of Tom Clancy and the cutting edge suspense of Vince Flynn. Well, that's a hell of an endorsement, my friend. Like, it doesn't
Yeah,
get,
that was very nice.
yeah, it doesn't get bigger than that. Yeah, and
Yeah, no, that was great. And
Brian, you still there?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm
Still
here. Sorry.
okay? Okay, I thought I
Yeah, so
lost you there for a
the
second. Yeah,
praise was great. Yeah, I think there's a pause there, but yeah. So yeah, the ideas were to we were sort of talking about technology and how technology can kind of get out of control, and that was some of the initial kind of inspiration for the book was to talk about these themes about technology. And like I said, the idea for this book, or actually the book started, I started working on the book in 2000, in the year 2000. And one of the sort of seminal inspirations was this article written by Bill Joy, which a lot of people don't know or remember him, but he was the chief technical officer at Sun Microsystems, one of these kind of early pioneers in tech. And he wrote this article for Wired, and it was called "Why the Future Doesn't Need Us." And in the article, he goes into depth about his sort of fears about the future, the rise of robotics, the rise of AI, what that will do to labor markets, what that will do to our sort of individual senses of freedom and to our democracies. And what was interesting about that is he had read the Unabomber Manifesto, Ted Kaczynski's ideas about technology. And he says, I actually agree with this guy. I don't agree with his methods of trying to
sure.
fight it,
Yeah,
but his view of what's going to happen here, I think is pretty accurate, and it frightens me, is what he said. So to see that from a technologically minded person, someone at the forefront of AI, and then myself, I was just coming out of working for GM in computers, really started to make me question, where we are going with technology. And I was watching some of your other podcasts. You're talking to Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson, and were talking about, AI. How scary is AI? And I think AI is scary, but I actually think scientists and engineers are scarier.
I agree. And I
and
think
what?
I know why you're
Yeah,
about to say that, because it's not the
yeah, yeah.
technology necessarily that's dangerous. It's the users and the people who apply it. And
hmm
I
hmm
think that's where the danger lies, because now we're relying on individual ethics and morals to use something. I guess it's kind of like a firearm, you know.
hmm
Um, people who follow the Second Amendment, who respect firearms. Like, my guns are all locked up in my safe right now. I go out to the shooting
hmm
range. I carry when I go out and I want to protect my family. My guns have never done anything wrong. I've never put them in the hand
hmm
of someone who didn't deserve them, or respect them, et cetera, et cetera. I could make the argument
hmm
all day long. I'm a law abiding, respectful Second Amendment supporter. However, there are
uh,
people out there who, yes, say the same thing, but they'll tote that gun around irresponsibly. Is it the technology, or is it the
hmm
user, the applicant?
right.
So going back to that, yeah, I think Andrews and Wilson brought up some great points on AI. I've asked a lot of authors this, Brad Thor, those guys.
hmm
You now, that's the scary thing of it, is what are we going to do with this? Are we going to use it? Like, my new editing software for the podcast has AI built in. It can
Uh-huh.
cut clips for me. It can run all the transcription and build the transcript for me. That's useful. That's great stuff. That same AI in the hands of a capable individual could hack into a government system. Did the AI do
hmm
that, or did somebody prompt it to? So I
Yeah,
agree with what you're about to say. Is
yeah, yeah.
what about the
No, and
people behind it?
it's a great metaphor. It's a great metaphor, and actually, I play with that quite a bit, especially in the final book, The Great Unmaking. Um, yeah, because I'm actually married to a scientist, so I have both an inside look and an outside look. But when you talk to scientists and you say, okay, well, what are your motivations? Why are you doing this? You often get these sort of lofty things like, oh, I want to help people, or I want to create a cure for something, or I want to be a pioneer in something. But I think that's a kind of BS, because the day-to-day goals of scientists and engineers are very short-sighted, in the sense of, like, I want that promotion, I want that government grant, I want the funding, I want the stock options. And that is what's sort of propelling some of the most powerful technology in the world. It's not, should I do this? It's not immoral, it's amoral. It's not thinking about the consequences. It's just sort of moving forward. And as I mentioned, the first book is this arms race between the United States and China. And of course, that creates this sort of sense of, oh, here we are in the United States. China is working on this really advanced technology that could really alter the balance of power. um, we have to act. If we don't act, then they'll do it, which is obviously, with AI. If I don't create the next AI level of AI, then someone else will. So I have to be the one who does it. This sort of race to reaching the next milestone. And there's a fascinating historical example of that in the actual Manhattan Project in Los Alamos. When VE Day came in Europe, and we realized that the Germans were nowhere near having an atomic bomb, because that had been the impetus, right? We have to make the bomb. Hitler might have the bomb. We have to beat them. We found out they didn't. And at Los Alamos, there was a huge party. All the scientists celebrated. They didn't have to worry about a bomb coming out of Europe. We knew Japan had no sort of infrastructure for this. We knew we were not competing with anyone. All the scientists took like a day off, and then the next day they all went back to work, working the same 80 and 100-hour week. So the idea was that they needed to know. They wanted to know if they could do it. And even when the primary threat was eliminated, the momentum of the project, it had become a thing. It had become its own sort of living need to fulfill, find out if the bomb would work, if we could do it. And that's what pushed us towards you know, the bomb. I haven't seen the movie. I've been wondering if they depict that in the new Oppenheimer movie.
I know. I want to
It's a
see it
very kind of
too.
fascinating moment. Yeah, yeah, of knowing that you've won, but the project sort of pulls you back in, and you can't stop. Right, once you start the process, you can't stop.
Well, and we've been in such an arms race since since then, since the Manhattan Project, and now
Yeah,
it seems like in the 90s and into the very beginning of the 2000s is when it really flipped over and it was more of like a commercial race. So then it turned into, you know, there was a couple of different smartphones out there, or the first version of smartphone, like the BlackBerry,
hmm,
and then it was like who's going to invent the next thing. And if you had Microsoft and Apple really going at it, and then that's when it seemed like computers exploded, and we went from a regular iPhone, Nokia to the first you know um, iPhone, and then it just seems like if you look at the way technology has advanced in the last 23 years since Y2K was supposed to wipe everything out, um, it's crazy to think that we went from having a mobile phone that basically fit in a bag inside your car that had to be plugged in
yeah,
at all
yeah,
times to this that it fits
yeah,
in
yeah.
my pocket and it does everything for me from my calendar to text to phone calls, email. I mean, I
Right.
do everything on this little device that I used
Yeah.
to have 50 devices for or whatever, so or 50 things for. So it's crazy what we've done in 23 years, but it also begs the question like you said, who's going to do the next thing because if it's not me, it's somebody else or it's you. Like somebody else is doing the next thing right now. The race is
Yeah.
almost so to a point where you're never going to win. There's no end to
Hmm.
the race. It's just going to constant evolution and changes in technology, which is interesting because you beg the question of like, well, what happens to the future? And like you brought
Hmm.
up that
Yeah.
article earlier, like the future doesn't need us because technology
Hmm.
is going to become so advanced that it's going to kill jobs. It's going to kill this and that because it doesn't. I mean, you can go online now, and like you were talking about earlier, you can watch fake clips of things happening. You can watch
Right.
AI
Right.
rendered clips of real people doing false things.
Right.
I never
Right.
did that. I never said that. I never filmed that. That's AI
Right.
recreating that, which is horrifying to think now there's a tool out there. So for all this misinformation and destructive media that's being used around the world, you could literally put President Biden on stage declaring war on Russia, and
Hmm.
he never uttered the words.
Right. Yeah.
That's scary
Yeah.
stuff, man. That's really
It
scary
is. It
stuff,
is.
and
It
it makes me
is.
nervous. But let's talk about your book, The Great Unmaking, the newest one that just came
Uh-huh.
out. You said
Yeah.
it's very AI heavy, and this is kind of asking a lot of those bigger questions. Give us the
Hmm.
30-second elevator pitch about The Great Unmaking and roughly spoiler free.
Right. Right. So actually, it it has a lot to do with a lot of these concepts we're talking about. But essentially, what's happened is from the first and second books, this very advanced technology is created, and it probably deserves a moment to sort of explain that because it's not just simply AI. I alluded before, it's sort of this merging of different technologies. So you have genetic engineering, you have essentially nanotechnology, and before we go into that, I know that when a lot of people, when they hear nanotechnology, might sort of roll their eyes because in Star Trek, whenever there's a serious problem, you just say, "Oh, the nanobots fixed it," or whatever. But for this series, I actually spent a lot of time looking at this, and I find it extremely fascinating technology. And the thing that makes it so interesting is that we are the model for it. That the idea that you can create a microscopic machine that can be used to manipulate the world very quickly and at a microscopic state is actually happening every second that we're alive. When I blink, that's protein, which is essentially a microscopic machine, breaking down the ATP to ADP. When I eat a piece of bread, there's an enzyme in my mouth that digests 40% of the carbohydrates before I swallow it. Right? So it's this very fast, very interesting technology that we know is out there. Richard Feynman was talking about this in the 50s, right? There's no reason why we won't figure out a way to control this and use it for different things. So it's the nanotechnology part mixed with genetic engineering, which essentially means we get to there's copies it can self-replicate, and then guiding it with AI systems. And like we mentioned before, this isn't a book where the AI or this technology is out there wringing its hands. It's not like the HAL 9000 in 2001. It's not Agent Smith in the Matrix. It's not itself, an evil entity that you have to do battle with. All of the systems that get created in the book do exactly what they're supposed to do. So what's interesting is that the technology gets created in the first book. In the second book, it begins to proliferate because it's so powerful. Everybody wants to get their hands on it. And then the third book, The Great Unmaking, is when everything kind of comes to a head as these different actors who've stolen it or using it within the military or have co-opted it. All these systems sort of collide in apocalypse event. And speaking of the technology and how technology goes and how we live in a technological society, what basically happens is that the whole human race gets reduced to about 13,000 years ago. So everyone goes back to a hunter-gatherer state at, towards the end of the book. So there's this chance, like, we fucked it up this time as far as our technology. Here's a second chance. Can we create another culture that's not going to head down the same way as the first one?
Very interesting.
So
So it's kind of like a hard
yeah,
reset.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so just to give an example of the technology. So there's a character in the book. She works at the Naval Research Lab in DC. She's has access to this technology. Her daughter has a rare genetic disease called Alexander's disease, which is killing her. So she illegally uses the technology to treat her daughter, basically creating a gene therapy um, um, system that is injected into her daughter. But the system, which is designed to fix her, continues to work even after the gene therapy is done. So as she goes about her life, as she's dealing with middle school and anxiety and being bullied and stuff, there's a system inside of her trying to figure out how to make things better. And that, of course, grows out of control, and has consequences as that program intermingles with these other programs that the other characters are using.
Wow. So is this the end of the series, or is there more to it? I mean, obviously you said there's kind of a hard
Yeah,
reset, but are
yeah.
you going to explore the days after?
So I'm happy to do that. And if you read the end, there's enough sort of rabbit holes or eggs left, Easter eggs left, that it can be expanded, but we sort of have to wait and see how the reception is and what the fans want.
So what
Yeah,
are you? I mean, I personally would like to see what you would do with the days after that, because it's modern day,
yeah,
but it's reduced back to old habits. The hunter gatherer, like you said, we don't have the
right,
technology. You basically
right,
have to repeat all these things. It'd be cool to see what you would do in 2024 with that
right.
style of living, and it'd be cool to see very primitive almost in a modern day of survival. I think that'd be cool to see, but
Yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely very enticing. And it wasn't a uniform reduction of technology. It was very spotty. So there's things that can come back and things that can't, or things that are lying around. So all the different programs that are trying to sort of save the planet or help people are still out there, but they're still they're intermingling and still fighting each other. So there's a lot of great. It's a good sandbox for sort of play around with what you can do.
Yeah.
One of the other major characters, in addition to the girl with the program, is essentially like an eco terrorist, someone who wants to save the planet. And so she basically kidnapped some of the scientists to make the technology for her. And her sort of scheme is to, she wants to sort of reduce climate change, but it basically means changing the nature of vegetation on the planet, so that there's like new types of trees, new types of moss, new type of things to sort of counteract what's going on. And so not only is technology sort of wiped out by one program, but this other program has sort of remade the the whole landscape of the earth. So
Hmm.
it's a fun little space. Yeah.
It is fun. It is a lot of room to play around with, but it also makes you wonder,
Yeah.
like, how close to reality could that be one day?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's kind of spooky. So what are you working on now? What's behind the keyboard today?
So I've actually started a fantasy project, like high
Okay.
fantasy, and it's pretty nerdy. It's a lot of like linguistic world building. It's a kind of a really refreshing change. It's been a lot of fun. It's very character based, very kind of character oriented. I'll tell you, it's quite a bit midlifey, in the sense that my characters, they're sort of people. Basically, there's a kingdom that's been destroyed, and these are sort of but it was destroyed like a decade ago. There's still a guerrilla war going on against this sort of evil empire, but it's some of the remnants of the old um, realm, trying to figure out if there's a way to still fight back, knowing that they're up against an enemy they can't really defeat. But what's interesting about it is, obviously, you talked about therapy, writing is therapy. I love that. That reminded me of Buddhism's Eightfold Path. One of the things in the Eightfold Path is your occupation must not conflict with your therapy, meaning that what you're studying, what you're writing about, should be consistent with what's good for you, right? And so the characters in this, or the principal character, is kind of going through a little bit of like a midlife thing, which is me. I recently had um, I recently had a lot of kind of bad things happen. I had two very good friends die recently. I had my
Mm,
sister die last year. Friend a little bit outside my circle committed suicide recently. So very much kind of looking at the second half of the journey,
yeah,
and very much like these characters who've suffered a very kind of demoralizing defeat, trying to make the best of what's left, and going on a mission to a lost city to um, figure out as a way to fight this enemy. So um,
cool.
what's fun about that is, in fantasy, people can live a long time.
Yeah.
So one race can only live to 100, or another race can live to 400. So some people get a lot of second chances in life, but other people don't.
Well, I think it's cool that, again, I think writing is therapy. I've said it plenty of times before, but I think that no story is a bad story because it has more than just commercial appeal to it. It has personal appeal, it has personal
Right.
desire, it has that therapy, that therapeutic aspect to it. So I think every writer should write, and I think writers should, if they want to, I think they should aspire to be a more than one genre type of author. Like I wrote a nonfiction book, and I want to write fiction books. I very well
Hmm.
could want to write another nonfiction in the future. I don't think I don't think the word author or the title of author has to be tied down to a specific genre. I think some people are really, really good at that, and that's just their wheelhouse, and that's what they want to
Hmm.
do, and it works best for them. But I think then there's other people that want to do other genres, and I definitely do kind of want to do um, other genres other than more of like a military and spy thriller. I want to get into crime. Um, I'd love to get into non-military or non-governmental characters and put them in
Uh-huh.
dangerous scenarios where then you explore how would the common man respond to a military or espionage type of situation, you know.
Yeah.
um, so
Hmm.
I think it's cool that you're going into another genre and that you're pursuing something you want to do, because I think it makes well-rounded individuals, and it helps you appeal to a mass market. And I know lots of readers out there who read, you know, thrillers and romance and
Uh-huh.
fiction and science fiction and fantasy, and they read a little bit of everything because, you know, they like certain authors and the way they do it. So I think it's really cool that that's something you're working on.
Yeah, thanks, thanks. And I've kind of felt even since graduate school that my my goal was to create an interesting body of work. Like before I leave this planet, that's
Yeah,
sort of my goal, is to create, an interesting body of work that covers a lot of different areas and ideas and themes. And that's what keeps it interesting, right? That's what keeps it,
yeah,
makes it fun. Yeah, you don't want to be doing. I won't. I'm not the type of person that would enjoy doing the same thing year after year. I just feel like I have to be learning and trying to test myself through with different challenges. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Not that you can't do that in the same genre, but I think it is liberating to kind of step out and have a whole new sort of set of rules and guidelines to follow and play with.
Yeah. So The Great
Yeah.
Unmaking is out now. The other two books and your nonfiction book are out as well. Brian, before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find more about you at and follow along.
Yeah, so my website is briannelsonbooks.com. Most of my updated information is there. I'm also pretty active on Facebook, Twitter, and I'm sorry, X, and Instagram. So yeah, check it out. A lot of fun stuff. I know we've been talking a lot about a lot of high concepts here, but there definitely are lots of action scenes, lots of gunfights, aerial battles. There's a lot of this sort of fun stuff of techno thrillers too, even though we've obviously talked today about a lot of the scary themes of it.
Yeah, still very cool stuff. Definitely interesting. Something I'm gonna have to check out for myself. I really like the idea of some of this kind of unmaking of things and how technology has advanced us to a peak and then dropped us down. It was a
Hmm.
pleasure having you on. Definitely keep in touch, and we'll do this again in the future. And man, I wish you the best of luck on the great unmaking. It sounds fantastic.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jeff. I really appreciate the time.